From the beginning of time, fire has been a crucial element of nature. As part of the natural balance, it has helped keep forests healthy by eliminating dense and diseased growth. Fire has also been both an ally and an enemy to mankind, providing warmth, but with the ever-present fear of the destruction that it could wield if out of control. It's early spring in the foothills of the Colorado Rockies. Warm winds blow steadily, erasing the last traces of snow and moisture. The population in the region has grown. The desire for many is to build into the wilderness, seeking a peaceful coexistence with nature. But with nature comes fire, and the potential for massive damage and loss of life. After an unusually dry winter and 3 years of below-average rainfall, concern is growing over the lack of water on the Front Range and the increasing risk of wildfire. It doesn't take long for the fire season of 2002 to begin.
The Hayman Fire started on June 8th, and it changed our whole lives, and I don't think anything will ever be the same.
This is the South Platte River. In this valley, just about 50 miles south of Denver, the river cuts through heavily forested land, grassy mountain meadows, and rugged rocky terrain. Its beautiful scenery and bountiful streams make it a favorite destination for fishermen and other outdoorsmen from across the country.
I'd say that the South Platte system probably offers, at least in the top 2 or 3, fly fishing, trout streams in all of Colorado. People fly from all over the world just to fish Cheeseman Canyon.
The quiet solitude and mountain lifestyle also make this part of the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains a popular place to live. Heavy population growth in the area has brought housing developments right into the heart of the forest. Fire management in both the National Forest and in the adjacent communities has been a mixed blessing.
Since about 1910 or so, we've been putting out all fires, rightfully so, to protect new communities. We thought we were doing the right thing. We just didn't balance it out with a good fuels management program.
By quickly extinguishing every fire, the forests have grown thick with pine and aspen trees, tall mountain grass, and sprawling scrub oak. During the previous 3 years, an unusual dry spell turned normally lush mountain forest into dried-out husk. The heavy carpet of pine needles and buffalo grass became brown and almost lifeless. During the spring of 2002, the cooler ocean patterns of La Nina kept the weather watchers and forest management teams on edge. Anticipating drier weather, high temperatures, and a lack of moisture during the normal monsoon season, fire officials prepared for the worst.
So we've been tracking that La Nina for the last 4 years, since 1998, where the climate has been changing in this part of the country.
During the winter months, we didn't really get the snowfall that we normally get. And with that comes the snowpack. And as those years progressed, it just got steadily worse, this drought. It got steadily warmer, steadily drier.
In February, we thought, holy cow, we're going to be looking at an extreme fire season if we don't get any moisture this spring.
A small fire in April, the Snaking Fire, takes its toll on over 2,500 acres of rugged terrain south of Bailey. In May, the Schoonover Fire turns nearly 5,000 acres southwest of Deckers into a raging inferno. And for a time, the Schoonover is the biggest wildfire in the country. A short time later, on the outskirts of Glenwood Springs, the Coal Seam Fire threatens to wreak serious damage on the bustling mountain town. More than 2 months ahead of schedule, the fire season was in full force, and it was barely June. Both the residents and the authorities kept their fingers crossed, hoping to get through the day without news of a major fire. On the morning of June 8th, the U.S. Forest Service issues a red flag warning. They worry that the high temperatures, low humidities, and volatile winds could cause even the smallest fire to quickly become dangerous.
The jet stream rounded the base of the trough. that was in the Great Basin and then swung up to the northeast across Colorado.
In the late afternoon, Terry Barton, a Forest Service employee, reports a small fire in a campground near Lake George on the southern edge of the Pike National Forest in Park County. Even though it was only a small grass fire, when the call came in, fire manager Mike Hessler realized the extreme potential for danger.
I knew the conditions. I immediately ordered an air attack, 2 Type 1 air tankers, and we had 4 engines within 5 minutes after Terry called it in at about a 20 by 20 grass fire.
We had a call come in that there was a fire up on Forest Service Road 290 and needed crews to respond. So we started moving.
In less than 20 minutes, the fire grew from little more than a spark to a daunting 10 acres. More frightening, the fire was erratic, moving in several directions at once and causing increasing concern for firefighters on the scene.
When I came up to Forest Service Road 290, I could see the smoke column. I knew we had a barn burner. It was a good one.
As the fire continued to grow, fire officials reacted quickly, calling for additional manpower and equipment.
I ordered a Type 3 helicopter, 2 more air tankers, checked into the availability of the 5 Type 2 hand crews we had pre-positioned at Woodland Park about a half an hour down the road. I ordered a hotshot crew that was pre-positioned, I believe, at Slide about an hour away.
We called the other resources in from from the rest of our department, as well as Florissant, which is 4 miles away.
The growing plume of smoke could be seen by folks living in the surrounding area. Everyone knew that if a fire started, it could quickly become the nightmare they had all feared.
Down to the south, we could kind of see some smoke, but more than that, we saw some these big slurry bombers, and they were almost heading right down our valley, headed that way. So we knew that there was a fire down there, but we've had fires for the last 43 years here.
You see the flame front coming over at you, the intensity of it. Never seen anything like it before. I fought a lot of fire, wildland fire out here like this, but nothing like that.
Firefighters from the Lake George Fire Department and the U.S. Forest Service had hoped to contain the fire to 40 acres by utilizing a 2-lane county road and a half-mile-wide meadow as a fire break. While engines and hand crews worked on the main body of the fire, helicopters dropped water from an adjacent stream on the numerous spot fires caused by airborne embers that crossed the fire break.
Over a half mile, in some places 3/4 of a mile away, spot fires were starting on the other side of these little ridges. We had our trucks spread out across this valley. This was our line of defense.
As daytime gave way to nightfall, darkness created new problems for firefighters. The weather, the terrain, and now the loss of air power meant hand crews faced overwhelming odds of slowing the fire before sunrise. Without the ability to fight the fire from the air, the fire quickly spread into areas too remote for fire crews to reach, especially at night. Under normal circumstances, fires usually lay down at night. The cooler temperatures and higher humidity generally help reduce the intensity of most wildfires. But this fire was different. As fire crews from Park and Teller counties and the Forest Service battled the first fire through the night, the spot fires gained intensity. Strategies of attack were formulated assessing the potential threats in the path of the fire. One of those targets threatened by the fire was Cheeseman Reservoir, a major water supply for Denver. Officials in Douglas County were contacted about this danger.
Park County Dispatch contacted us and asked us to consider evacuating along the river for the recreationalists and the people that were fishing, etc., and camping along the river. So we did that. We contacted the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and they had a deputy respond and notify people that they might need to evacuate in the event that this fire actually came closer to Douglas County.
For both firefighters and homeowners, it was going to be a long night. By Sunday morning, the conditions that every firefighter fears came together in perfect alignment. Wind, terrain, low humidity, and plenty of tinder-dry fuel created an ominous situation.
The overnight humidities basically only got up into the low 20s, low to mid 20s, so there wasn't much moisture or humidity recover overnight. Plus the overnight temperatures stayed generally in the 60s.
As luck would have it, the fire had started at the mouth of a valley which acted like a chimney.
The winds were in perfect alignment to push the fire right up that chimney, right up that drainage of the South Platte River into Cheeseman and further, even towards Highway 285. When we did the wildland fire situation analysis on the morning of June 9th, I couldn't keep up with it. I would do a strategy, say, okay, the fire's gonna burn to here and here and here, and here's our contingency and our strategy, and our fallback strategy, and our worst case scenario. And the fire was moving so fast that I didn't get the thing done until June 10th.
I remember consulting with the Type 3 incident management team that was on scene that was trying to manage this fire. And the biggest problem we had at that point was finding a map big enough to show the perimeter of the fire.
I would say it was about 11 o'clock or something at that time that I received pretty much a frantic phone call from the director, which is Jim Raymond, stating that we had a serious problem, that the fire was well out of control, that it was moving in the direction of Douglas County.
Of the 5 counties directly affected by the fire, Douglas County had the greatest population. As the fire started a northern run, local officials began to realize that this was no ordinary fire, and the potential for massive evacuations was very real.
I could tell immediately after arriving at the scene from the face of both Jim and the people that I was seeing that we were in for a shock.
It was early on Sunday that we realized that the strategy and tactics simply weren't working, and what we needed to do was make life safety the first priority. And that was very difficult for people to accept, that we simply needed to get out of the way of this fire.
First place, I didn't think we'd leave. The second place, I didn't think we'd be gone over 2 days. And the third place, I didn't think I'd ever burn down.
Evacuation is kind of tricky because we don't want to evacuate people too early, but we certainly want to give them enough time to safely and quietly evacuate their area without putting them in any danger. A fire moving as fast as the Hayman was, that was pretty tricky.
At 10 o'clock Sunday morning on the 9th, a friend from Woodland called and said, "I'm coming over right now to pack you up." And I went, I don't think so. I'm fine. And he said, "I'm on my way." He got here at 10:30, came in the door. By then, the clouds were really getting high. The black was up there. I already knew some people were evacuated. I was getting a little nervous.
A huge impact in our area was the number of animals that were impacted by the fire. Large animals, horses, other forms of livestock. It's a big horse community down here, and that was a real big issue with people.
I called home to find out what was going on, and my daughter was here watching the ranch for us, and she's not a horse person. She said, "It's bad." She said, "There's a black cloud coming up over the mountains. We can't see, we can't breathe. It's just horrible. You got to come home. We're going to have to get the horses out of here." They called the volunteers in from Douglas County Fairgrounds, and there were 10 trailers lined up here to move horses.
Now dubbed the Hayman Fire, it continued to move northward at about 5 miles an hour, consuming hundreds of acres of national forest land. Fanned by hot, dry winds, the fire moved quickly, growing exponentially, and challenging fire crews to keep up.
The Hayman Fire had spread 22,000 acres and hit the southern end of Cheeseman Reservoir. Of course, when it hits a natural barrier like that, such as a reservoir, the fire's going to split. And that's what happened. The fire split.
And one finger went south of Lake Cheeseman and one finger went north. And all of a sudden, and we would be on that northern finger, and all of a sudden, instead of being south, all of a sudden, the smoke started to come our way. So now the reality maybe that this thing was really going to hit kind of came in.
As the Red Cross began setting up shelters in schools in neighboring Sedalia and Woodland Park, a Type 1 incident command team was ordered. These elite teams of federal, state, and county officials specialize in managing disasters across the country.
They brought in what they call fire behavior analysts, and these are specialists that have studied fire behavior and where it travels and where the fire might go and what kind of intensity it might actually have. The fire behavior analyst from Montana said that we don't have a model for a fire like this. And I think at that point we realized that this fire really was capable of doing more than anybody could imagine.
Residents in the area watched their quiet forest and pasture lands change right in front of their eyes. Those closest to the fire were engulfed in a choking black haze, and the fire was advancing so fast that many homeowners were caught by surprise by the flames that were suddenly at their doorsteps.
All of a sudden we heard an explosion, and it came into some of my cabins up here on this hill, and we had a single wide trailer that had hit, and it was metal, and it just preheated and just exploded. It was so hot that we had 3 haystacks and they self-combusted. All of a sudden we're sitting here and all of a sudden, boof, and they just took off. The fire wasn't, maybe 100 yards away, but this air was so superheated that those haystacks just went.
Throughout the day on Sunday, crews battled the fire across rugged terrain. Flames shot hundreds of feet into the air as bone-dry conifer and ponderosa pine trees literally exploded from the heat.
When we were first sent up into the area, we were told there would be basically no firefighting efforts that first day and first night. It was all geared towards assisting the law enforcement agencies in doing evacuation.
We told every officer, you tell everybody 3 times. 3 distinct times you tell them, we are advising you to leave. If they don't leave, we tell you, we take your name, that's all we ask from you, and if we have to come find you, and we have to find the body or whatever, and you didn't heed the warning, then we'll have the name and we'll have it documented that we told you.
We wanted so much to protect everybody's safety, and I think a fire of this magnitude was so beyond the thought process and so beyond some of the training that we've had in the past that it was very difficult to communicate exactly how dangerous this fire really was, especially early on.
We had 2 deputies come by and tell us we had to get out, and we had to get out now. We weren't ready to leave, and we informed them in no uncertain terms we weren't ready to leave. We were leaving.
More than 1,000 residences were evacuated in Deckers, Trumbull, and West Creek. Overall, 4,000 people had either been evacuated or notified to evacuate because of this fire. But officials worried that more than 40,000 people would be eventually forced out of their homes. The fire grew at an incredible rate, moving a staggering 19 miles in a single day. By Sunday night, it had grown to an awesome 30,000 acres, an unbelievable run, making it the fastest moving fire ever witnessed. By now, more than 150 firefighters had responded, along with a Forest Service hand crew, an air tanker, and 3 heavy-lift helicopters. That evening, the Type 1 emergency teams were in place, and complete authority to fight the fire was turned over to them. Their command center was set up at Lake George, near where the fire had started. The Hayman Fire had rewritten history. In less than 24 hours, it had grown from little more than a spark into an incredible inferno that threatened thousands of people. That night, tired firefighters could only be thankful that no one was injured, but they braced themselves for what was to come. By Monday, June 10th, the fire appeared unstoppable. At 10 a.m., the fire had covered more than 61,000 acres. Near the fire, visibility dropped to less than a quarter of a mile, as thick smoke hung over the entire Front Range. Smoke was reported as far north as the Wyoming border and as far south as Amarillo, Texas. Local firefighters began the arduous chore of going from house to house in an attempt to save as many homes as possible. If it was practical to save the house, they would clear brush, trees, and firewood from around the building. It was slow, hard work, made more difficult by the hot weather. But if they were successful in removing potential fuel from around the house, the flames could pass nearby without causing damage. By midday, the U.S. Forest Service had closed the Pike National Forest, an unprecedented move. Colorado's Governor Owens followed suit by closing Roxborough State Park, Waterton Canyon, and parts of Mueller and 11 Mile State Parks. The communities of Roxborough Park, Roxborough Village, Indian Creek Ranch, Sedalia, and Perry Park, more than 14,000 people were added to the list to evacuate. Fearing traffic jams on narrow, dead-end roads, sheriff's deputies urged residents to leave early before escape routes could be overwhelmed. The small community of Rainbow Falls fell right into the path of the fire. Officials made the decision to devote the manpower to save as many homes there as possible.
But we first needed to be able to get clearance to just get in there and size it up and make some triage assessments and determine what resources we would need and if it would be possible to safely work in that area. With the use of dozers and hand crews building fire line up on the hillsides around us in conjunction with the engines doing structure preparation and protection, we were able to save all the homes in that subdivision.
Tuesday morning saw no relief for firefighters. The fire had literally exploded to almost 80,000 acres. Hot, dry weather and 30-mile-an-hour winds pushed the fire in all directions. The number of firefighters was over 400 and climbing, and the fire was now being fought with 4 air tankers and 6 helicopters. The Hayman Fire had the dubious distinction of being the #1 fire priority in the nation.
We were talking about a fire that, in order to get from the north end to the south end, took 2 hours. In many cases, the helicopters and the aircraft weren't able to see the fire because the smoke was so heavy. And in many cases, the people on the ground, the field observers, had to be so far away from the fire, they had a very difficult time telling exactly which hill or which ridge this fire was actually on. As the fire continued to make such large runs, and as it continued to consume so much of a geographical area, the management of the fire decided to go ahead and install a second incident management team on the north side of the fire.
The command centers quickly became a hive of activity as firefighters and support staff poured in from every corner of the country. Tractor trailers arrived carrying portable kitchens, showers, and supplies, while local volunteers did their best to make the fire crews more comfortable.
Over the course of about 3 days, I mobilized our units from the state of Colorado, but we also had units from New Mexico and Arizona and Texas and Oklahoma that came to our assistance, and we had an additional 15 units on standby in Southern California alone that was available.
We can't do anything without volunteers in any program, and that's wonderful the way the people, I've had them here from Fort Collins, Aurora.
Peoria, Illinois.
And you guys just got here today?
Yeah, about 10 o'clock, 16 and a half hours.
Just felt like helping out the animals?
Yeah, we're in the fire department back there, so they were saying they need people out here, so we jumped in the car the next day, no questions asked, quit our jobs, and on the way.
Actually, I'm having a lot of fun. I'm contemplating volunteering some time on Monday on one of my days off to come in and help out, so.
Rumors began to spread about hundreds of homes being destroyed by the fire. While not official numbers, they created increasing concern for the people being forced out of their homes. County information specialists did their best to keep the lines of communication open for the thousands directly affected by the fire.
Fire information, this is Heather.
The homeowners were very frustrated, very frustrated. I think that the department, the county, and certainly my unit made efforts to try to ease the frustration, but many of them wanted access to their homes. They wanted to know a time frame of how long they would be out of their homes, and they wanted answers to questions that there were no answers immediately. So what we would do is provide information and services, not only about their homes, the destruction or damage of their homes, or the fact that their home was all right, relocation information. We would disseminate pictures, but then we would also address the emotional and other needs of people, whether it was related to their phone systems, whether it was the elderly needing some assistance or guidance, whether it was listening to people's concerns about their pets, their property, or just giving the emotional support that people needed so that they knew someone was listening and that someone cared.
The numbers announced on Wednesday morning weren't any more encouraging. The fire now covered over 136 square miles, an area larger than all of Denver. The displaced residents waited in shelters and hotel rooms near the fire zone, waiting, wondering, and hoping.
Everybody hung out at the Lake George School in the gymnasium. The incident command guy was there, and all these people, and you could sign up where you were staying so your neighbors could find us and we could compare notes or help each other.
We immediately put together a team of people that both from the air and from land basically went out, and anytime they were able to come across any area that they were able to identify as being destroyed from the fire, we gave them a digital camera, and they were able to take the digital camera and plot it on a GPS. And so we were able to start almost immediately formulating what type of damage occurred and provide that information back to the public.
And I had contacted a homeowner, or he had contacted me initially, and then I had returned his calls, who lived on the road where in fact we had photographs of. And he and I were talking by phone. I was looking at the photographs. He was describing his property to me. There was really almost nothing left. And he said to me, "Oh, so we're not really talking that you need a house description?" And I said, "No." He said, "Is there a Weber grill?" And I said, "Well, yes, there is a Weber grill." And I focused in on it, and I got a close-up of the Weber grill on my computer. He goes, "What does it look like?" And I described it to him. He goes, "That one's mine." And his house was actually identified through the Weber grill. And I think that is indicative of so many stories we have from people. This was not necessarily identifying your house or identifying your plot. It was more about identifying the little items that were left that meant something to you, that you knew were a part of your life in the mountains.
By Thursday, the fire had topped 100,000 acres. Officially, the fire had reached Deckers. More than 15,000 people in Douglas County had been evacuated, and the fire had grown so large that it was clearly visible by the shuttle astronauts in space. In the rugged hills west of Castle Rock, firefighters continued their struggle to gain the upper hand on the fire. Crews set backfires hoping to deprive the advancing flames of fuel. Residents in the fire area quit looking for rain and began watching for helicopters to make water drops instead.
Thursday evening at 5 o'clock, we went to the Lake George School, and it was body to body because everybody was there waiting to find out what was left up here. So the undersheriff came in, and he read a list of all the places that were burned. And so they read 3 places that were burned up, and then they read our house number, as in next. And I going, "Oh my gosh." He said, "And you did a remarkable job on defensible space." And I said, "Yeah, well, does that mean our house is okay?" And he said, "Everything is okay. It is beautiful. You have a beautiful house." So I said, "Well, did you use the hot tub?" He said, "No, I didn't have time."
The military dispatched 4 of their giant C-130 bombers to help fight the fire. The planes had been converted to drop up to 3,000 gallons of slurry in a single pass. As the fire grew, so did the cost. In just the few days since the fire began, the price for fighting the fire had climbed to almost $20 million. Every bomber run cost nearly $4,000, and a single water drop by a helicopter was $1,100. By Friday, the number of firefighters had swelled to 1,600. But the Hayman Fire was only one of 6 major fires in the state. The world watched as Colorado and the rest of the West struggled to save their burning forests and grasslands. Fires like the Hayman, and the Rodeo Fire in Arizona competed for limited resources and stretched the national fire crews to the breaking point. National and even international news crews descended on Douglas County. Within a few days, parking lots across Castle Rock were filled with satellite trucks and news people looking for the latest story. Their arrival added to the already overwhelming list of challenges that both the local officials and the area residents had to deal with.
So they stuck the microphone in the window and said, "So, is your house burned? And are you okay? And what are you doing?" And my husband said, "We are very, very blessed, and we're doing fine, and we're concerned about our neighbors," and just a couple, 2, 3 sentences. And here's this little yuppie, sweet little blonde thing with every hair in place. After I'd come from my filthy, dirty house and garbage in the back seat, and I was like not a happy camper. So I sat there with my cap over my head, face, and sunglasses, and as we drove away, I just burst into tears. And while we were standing by the boards, trying to figure out what's going on with our property, one of the neighbors said, "Don't cry or they'll take your picture." I thought, that's kind of sad. You know, could we just have privacy? This is a hard time for people.
As the fire entered its second week, it was anything but old news for the fire crews on the front lines. Small fire departments did their best to guard remote areas like Trumbull and other mountain communities. The volunteer firefighters worked to save the small towns where they lived. As the fire swarmed around them, they literally had to defend their own fire stations from being destroyed by the flames. Saturday saw the number of firefighters reach 1,738, and the number of aircraft was now at 13. Probably the most important number for the fire crews was the percentage of containment. The fire was almost 30% contained. That 30% was quite an achievement. Despite their best efforts, fire crews had been barely able to claim a 5% containment during the previous week. Just as things were looking up, reports came of an arrest. Following an extensive investigation, Terry Barton, the Forest Service employee who initially reported the fire, had confessed to starting the fire.
That was hard. That was really hard for him because not only was it a Forest Service worker, but it was also a neighbor. She lived in Florissant. And so there was really a sense of betrayal.
The fact that Terry Barton happened to work for the Forest Service was not relevant to me. I mean, I have heard just enough about her to know that she did a lot of the good before, and she made a mistake.
Who can appreciate what state of mind she was in to do that? But she worked for 18 years. She obviously loved, you know, that land and what she did, and she's going to carry that around the rest of her life, that she was responsible for the worst fire in the history of the state. I mean, that's hard.
The trigger point that actually initiated evacuation in our district, in Perry Park Ranch area and a couple other subdivisions that we have, was when the fire was to cross Highway 67 at Rainbow Falls. The day that it did that, it was the second week of the fire.
As the second week wore on, there were still more than 5,400 people forced out of their homes by the Hayman Fire. But for 1,800, the news finally came. They could go home. Still, another 10,000 people were threatened by the fire as it continued its march toward the heavily populated areas to the north.
You just can't believe that you're in this thing and everybody's banding together. It was like the whole state of Colorado, plus all the other places, came together. And when we had the barricades at the bottom of the mountain so that we could come out and check our house once in a while, the policemen there were from all over Colorado also, you know, like Boulder and Golden and Bailey, and all these vehicles parked down there were just fantastic. So every time we'd go up or down in the mornings, so we didn't come every day, but just to see how things were going up here. Say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
brush fire crews were still arriving at both of the command centers. Overall, their numbers had reached over 2,300. The Forest Service and local fire companies were pouring everything they could muster into controlling the fire. 116 fire engines, 19 helicopters, and 11 bulldozers now worked to stop the runaway fire. But the weather was not cooperating. 90-degree temperatures and only 5% humidity caused officials to issue another red flag warning.
We had another pressure system coming in that created more winds, and that, with those winds, created more activity. And we had the fire starting to spread to the east and to the south towards Woodland Park and towards the Rampart Range and towards where we are sitting right now. And so we thought, well, we better bring in a third team because for the contingency if the fire continues to spread towards Woodland Park and Colorado Springs.
The fire pushed further back to the south in Teller County. It could move quickly, consuming more than a half mile in less than 4 minutes.
Hotshot crews would build line to try to contain this fire, and in many cases it would just jump those lines. So then we had to go back and re-anchor that line and rebuild that line and hope that it wouldn't cross it again.
The fire was becoming a test of endurance and stamina. It was as dangerous as ever, but now increasing fatigue could be fatal. One misstep, one careless moment, and the frontline crews could pay a heavy price. By the weekend, containment still hovered around 45%. A small amount of rain on Thursday night hadn't helped much. Officially, the number of burned homes now stood at 79. After 3 weeks of national headlines about the fire and the closure of state parks and other recreation areas, the fire had also taken its toll on the tourist trade, so vital to many of the mountain and front range communities. Streets, usually filled with shoppers and travelers, were virtually deserted. Local economies reeled from the lagging business.
We lost all last summer, and the summer is my prime season. And we did not open back up, so from June 9th till Labor Day, we were closed.
Overall, $1.7 billion worth of tourism across the state was lost because of the fire season of 2002.
It took until mid-July for the fire to be declared 100% contained. One by one, residents returned to their homes fearing what they might find, yet grateful for the chance to leave hotels and shelters behind. For many, their partnership with nature would never be the same. Their feelings of safety and comfort had been stolen by the fire.
As we moved back in and looked out of the decks at the burned areas and the black stakes out there, I didn't think I could ever be safe again. I am starting to feel comfortable, like I might trust the woods again, and that's kind of scary.
More than 130 homes were destroyed by the fire. Another 600 structures like barns and outbuildings were also turned to ash by the heat and flames.
And initially, every time it rained, you could smell the ash and the burn. That was really bad. And some people still can. It's still bad.
I could not believe when we went back in there. I mean, as far as you could see, because you see the back of Signal Butte, which of course got burned, and that whole entire canyon, and it's just nothing but, I mean, it was like a lunar landscape. So that was pretty unnerving. And by then, I'd been working these fires for 3 or 4 months, and I think one of our mental health workers said, you know, you need to go find some unburned forest and just relax.
Concerns about potentially dangerous flash flooding and erosion prompted forest managers to immediately begin recovery work. It's estimated that the recovery of the Hayman Fire will take more than 10 years, beyond a price tag that's expected to top $80 million. The Forest Service, the state and counties, environmentalists, residents, and politicians will debate forest management for years to come. Issues like logging and prescribed fires will continue to be hot topics long after the memory of the Hayman Fire fades.
We really need to establish the procedures and equipment and resources and policies so that we can effectively manage these fires into the future, because the reality is that wildland fire is really here to stay, and it's a threat that we really need to continue to plan for aggressively and be able to manage effectively so that we can continue to save lives in the future.
We were found out about the fire just before 1 o'clock today, and here we're not even 6 o'clock, and we're talking the 3 by 5 mile area.
Yeah, and are we talking structures? Do you know anything about structures?
We have had some reports of minor structure damage, but that has not been able to be confirmed, and probably will not be confirmed till later this evening or sometime tomorrow. This is a very out of ordinary urban interface wildfire, which is typically not something that we see in this area, and residents may not be prepared for. But we do want them to remain calm, not panic, understand that if we do order an evacuation, it's for their safety and because it is actually significantly necessary, and we'll try to get those people back into those areas just as soon as they're safe.
We do have some new information on the Overland fire burning in Boulder County. We go back now to Bob Kendrick. Bob, what do you have for us?
I can tell you that the news here has gotten worse, as it has with the Cherokee Ranch fire. The size of this blaze has now quintupled in just the past couple of hours, as well as with the one in Douglas County. We're now up to between 4,000 and 5,000 acres in size for this blaze, which is burning off of the Jamestown.
As cities stretch their reach into nearby forest and open country, fire will always be a partner of nature and an undeniable force to be reckoned with.